Okay, so this is hopefully my last recording of this video because I've screwed it up so many times. But yeah, I just wanted to give an introduction to this build that I made for 3.14 Ultimatum for Path of Exile. And the idea behind it is a EQ Ignite Elementalist. So EQ Ignite, it has been done before, but what's different about this build is that we're also utilizing bleed. So it's a pure fizz build. It causes heavy bleeding damage, and it causes the ignites by utilizing Shaper of Flames, which allows for the physical damage to also ignite. Other ignite earthquake builds that I've seen, they primarily focus entirely on elemental damage, so they'll scale up the elemental damage through ele conversion, which I don't think is a good method because you're not really double dipping very much since you're only going for the ignite damage, and other skills like Burning Arrow and Flame Blast will do a lot more damage. So on this POB over here, I listed up a couple of highlights. One of the pros, as you can see from utilizing Earthquake, is that you're very, very tanky because you're doing a melee playstyle, so you have very high armor and you also have Molten Shells. So when I have my Granite Flask up, I have about 42k armor. I'm also using items like the Formless Flame. Let me switch over to POB over here. So I'm utilizing the Formless Flame and Helmet, which increases my armor by the uncapped fire resistance. So when I pop off my Granite Flask, yep, we're at 42. I also have Determination and Purity of Flame, Purity of Fire due to that. So very, very tanky from that. I also have very good Chaos resistance from damage over time, and I'll get into a little bit more about why that is in a bit. So let's go back to the POB over here. Did I go over all the notes? Yes, so let's just cover everything really quick. So, it's the melee playstyle. You get really big slams. Big slams cause really big ignites and bleeds, which is really fun. And you also have Fortify since you're melee, and since you're Elementalist, you get all the golem benefits from running all 4 golems. You don't need to increase the number of golems unless you really want to invest the money to do so. It's very expensive to increase your number of golems beyond the passive trees, and you really only need to run 4 to get the maximum benefit of all the bonuses, which would be the Chaos, Stone, Flame, and Lightning. So a couple of cons would be that if you're comparing it to a traditional Ignite build, so I've run Burning Arrow in the past. Burning Arrow damage is very, very, very good. So 5 stacks of Burning Arrow, you'll be doing about 16 million damage with 5 stacks of Burning Arrow with a boss. This one caps out about 4 million, which is still pretty good damage, but it's not Burning Arrow damage. Same with Flame Blast. It's also a much slower mapper than Burning Arrow for obvious reasons, since melee versus range. And this is also a very experimental build, so it hasn't been anywhere close to optimized since I think just in the last 2-3 patches it became viable with the changes that they made to the Elementalist ascendancy. So Bleed Ignite, traditionally people will focus on one or the other because if you look at the passive tree, a lot of the multi that you get for the increased damage is specific to either bleed or ignite. So in this case, you see over here it's fire damage over time multiplier, and over here it's +8 damage over time multiplier for bleeding. So before you wonder why I got this node but not the other one, it's because this one has bleeding chance. So one issue with this build is that it's hard to get bleeding chance. Like there's only 2 places you can get it, over here where you get 20% and over here where you get 25. So in order to try to hit 100% bleed chance, you got to get all the bleed chance you can get everywhere. So one way we double dip with the ignites is by grabbing these passive skills that add increased damage with ailments. So since ignite and bleed are both ailments, it benefits both of these. another way is utilizing cluster jewels. So rather than getting the specific damage over time multiplier, these medium cluster jewels have a plus 4% to damage over time multiplier, which is generic. It works for all damage over time. So that would be poison, bleed, and ignite. So you get this, it's plus 4 to all of them. I guess also like chaos damage, like essence drain as well. So it's really, really powerful. And you also get these other notables, which add further damage over time multiplier. And this one as well, exposure therapy gives me 8% damage over time multiplier with 30% chaos resistance against damage over time. So really, really powerful. Cluster jewels can be utilized here. If you want to be super aggressive, maybe you could run 2 batches of cluster jewels. I don't think that's really possible with this particular build because of the fact that there's a lot of traveling being done on the tree. So you see this huge chunk of traveling over here. A lot of skill points get used just to get to resolute technique and unwavering stance. So let's see. I think that pretty much covers the general mechanics. So one of the things that I wanted to mention with the build, let's go back over to POE, is mapping. So there's a couple of different options. Don't pretend you didn't see that. So there's a couple of different options you can use for mapping. The first would be to socket in a elemental like ignite prolif on the earthquake, just for like a mapping setup, and that would probably work just fine. Another option that I ended up using was the aberrant hooves, and it also proliferates a little bit differently. The mechanic with aberrant hooves and barracks respite is slightly different than the ignite prolif support, but any of these work just fine. And the interesting thing about aberrant hoof support that I discovered is if you run ignite prolif in the hooves, it also further spreads the ignites even further. At least that's the way I feel, because I've run these boots with the support and without the support, and it definitely feels like there's more spread when you're doing ignite prolif. So if you have the sockets or you're fine with just like running unbound ailments, like you socket it out for mapping, like you put this in and put this in for when you're up against the boss, it's a perfectly acceptable way to run your maps. So I think I pretty much covered most of what I wanted to say for the build. Let me just oh yes. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So let's just do one really quick map just so you can kind of see what the build looks like. And as you can see, I'm nowhere near complete on the build yet. I'm level 85, but the build is very tanky, even though I only have 4k life, due to the fact that I have 42k armor and Val Molten Shell. The build deals very well with pretty much everything. Like, the only thing I've really died to are chaos damage over time, which is why the cluster jewels that I picked up, as you can see, there's a lot of focus on there's quite a lot of focus on getting chaos resistance, because that's, I would say, more than half of my deaths were caused by chaos resistance. So let's take a look over here really quick. You can see from my deaths, I've died 11 times, and the reason for that, 5 of those deaths were caused by just me being an idiot when I was leveling up to maps in softcore, but 5 of them were actually caused in maps, and 3 of them were caused by fighting against that one boss who does chaos damage, Al Hizan, I think, the hunter. So yeah, he really wrecked me pretty badly. But as you can see, I'm doing pretty darn well. I haven't even popped my Molten Shell or anything yet. Let's see how let's go find the boss. Yep, he's got a bleed. Yeah, so very comfortable damage. You just hit and run with the big slam and just let the ailments do the rest of the work, pretty much. And if you want to speed it up a little bit, you can also trigger off the Valor Earthquake. Which is what I do when I'm delving or I'm in an ultimatum, because it gets like, it kind of becomes like a cluster F when you're doing that stuff, as you'll see right now. Ooh, man, those things hurt. Those storm callers, though. It just keeps going. I'm playing a little bit sloppy right now. I think it's because I'm making this video, but under normal circumstances, I don't think I'd be like I'm not even keeping my seismic cry up, which is entirely my fault. Should be it, right? There we go. So that's kind of the demo, I guess, of the build. Still in its very early stages, but I think it's performing well enough that I could share it with people. And you know, maybe if you're looking for something a little bit off meta and still also like pretty strong, then I think this build might be for you. It's definitely something that you might want to look into. Once I finish this, just gonna finish up this map and then I'll end the video with that. So anyone who's played like a Burning Arrow kind of mapper knows that this is definitely a little bit slower than Burning Arrow. More than a little bit slower than Burning Arrow, but as I said, it's still a very fun build, so if you're interested in doing an Earthquake Ignite build like I was, I think that this is probably one of the best options you can pick, because like I said, the other ones, they primarily focus on doing Ellie conversion. I think that double dipping with Bleed and Ignite is the way to go, and with the addition of cluster jewels to the game, the option is more viable than ever. So, a couple of things that I'll note on before I leave. Issues with the build that I still haven't entirely figured out yet would be the final gear. So I'm not sure if I'm going to keep using these boots or if I'm going to utilize some other way to proliferate, like I mentioned, like the Ignite Prolif. Um, Same with the Unwavering Stance. If I were to get rid of these boots, I'd probably utilize Calms instead because the action speed reduction immunity is really awesome and I don't really need these sockets. Um, Another thing is the what was I gonna say? I lost my train of thought. So the Ignite Prolif, sure, that's one thing. I guess the cluster jewels, like I'm not entirely finalized on that as well, or the skill tree. And yeah, also the ascendancy. I'm kind of thinking like I mean Bastion Development seems like the safe, easy choice, but Shaper of Storms is kind of appealing because it really improves the damage pretty significantly. So if you have any questions or concerns that you want to point out or issues with the build, please leave a comment and let me know your thoughts. I'm very interested to see if anyone else wants to also try out this build and how you're doing. So yeah, let me know. Let me know how it goes. Till then, I guess I'll see you guys later, and I'll hopefully post up another video updating you guys on what the final setup looks like before the league's over, ideally. Till then, doodles.